Thank you for stopping by and celebrating the Warren Public Library's 150th anniversary with us. We're so glad you're here. Tonight's speaker is Paquette, and Ellen is a 7th generation Warren County native who has been fascinated by our region's history and natural environment since childhood. All right, so let's please welcome Ellen.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here to share some Warren history with you in the library, which is one of my favorite places in Warren. And I brought some of my stuff in my childhood book bag. This is what I'd come to the children's room and get my 2 weeks worth, or the bookmobile. I had to put new handles on it last year because it wore out, because I still use it. But this is a really special place. Libraries are really special places. They're the heart of our communities. And so thank you for coming, participating in an event, helping celebrate this wonderful occasion. We have such a vibrant and healthy library. Do I need to turn up the... This is the condenser. Check, 1, 2. That was the antenna. The antenna doesn't like me getting close to it. Let's try this again. There's a little feedback. I'll just project. I'll project as well as I can. Okay, this is a crutch. I put in my theater voice. But what I want to say before I take you down the rabbit hole with me tonight is, please make time sometime. There won't probably be time tonight because I'm going to tell you a lot of stuff and it's going to take a while. But there is a wonderful exhibit on the library's history in the Wetmore Gallery on this level. And I've already been twice. And I'm going to go back because it is an incredible overview of how our public library came about and all the interesting twists and turns in its history. And I want to give a shout out to the 3 women who created this incredible exhibit. Staff members Julie Miller, who's the Communications and Outreach Librarian, Jennifer Nisley, who's the Reference Librarian, and volunteer and patron Kitty Hagberg. There she is. I just was blown away by the amount of research they did and how beautifully they presented it in very manageable info bites. So and lots of wonderful photos. There's some great old Warren photos in that exhibit to take in, on top of all the library history. Okay, I'm going to say, let's hold questions. I hate to be the don't ask me questions during this, but I am going to say I'm going to get on a roll, and I've got a lot of slides and a lot of information. It'll be easier if we wait till the end. I'm going to make sure we have time for you to ask questions, because interesting things always come up, and I want to hear what you have to say or add to this. And I got to remember to breathe and hydrate, so. Check, 1, 2. There we go. It's one of these close range ones, okay. So, here we go. I hope by the end of our time together tonight, these images will have kindled a fresh appreciation for where we've come from, what we still have, and what an extraordinary environment we live in here in northwestern Pennsylvania. And we are really fortunate to have the beautiful Allegheny River at our doorstep. I'm going to be focusing on the history, pre-1900 history of Warren, and especially as it relates to the Allegheny River and why the river was crucial to Warren existing at all as a city. And this slide selection is just a tiny, tiny fraction of what's available in our community to see. The Warren County Historical Society has an amazing photo collection. The Warren Library has an amazing photo collection. I'm going to tell you more towards the end about how you can access these, and then some other recommendations if you love looking at old pictures of familiar places. So let's set the stage. This region was once a wilderness comprised of forests of hardwoods, hemlock, and pine, and home to the Seneca Indians. The shores of the Allegheny River and its tributaries provided ideal locations for Seneca villages and camps. For the Seneca, the Allegheny was a means of transportation and a vast fishery. They called it the Beautiful River. Others are far more versed in the Seneca, especially Alex Watkins, if you're looking for someone to talk about the Seneca, their history and culture than I, so I'll pick up with events that led to the establishment of Warren as a town. This area was almost inaccessible wilderness, except through these natural water channels, the Allegheny and its tributaries. And that is how early explorers such as La Salle in 1669 and 1670 and Celeron in 1749 entered this region. English trappers and traders in the early 1700s plied the Allegheny River and its tributaries in flatboats and canoes. These navigable creeks and rivers were also very attractive to enterprising settlers because this clearing of land through timbering, which was the earliest activity, opened up space for farmland. Sawmills sprang up on streams leading to the three major tributaries of the Allegheny, the Conowongo, Broken Straw, and Kinzig Creeks, and the sale of timber downriver was at the heart of the early development of Warren as a community and economic center. Now, the town of Warren itself was laid out and surveyed and laid out in 1795, and you may already know the county and town were named for General Joseph Warren, who was a doctor and patriot killed at the Battle of Bunker Hill in 1775. Now, eventually, discovery of oil in nearby Titusville led to a boom in drilling, which is another economic boost to the development of this area. An entry of railroads into this region around 1859 increased trade in goods, and banks, manufacturing, and retail surged. Jeez, you can hear sound like a Hufflepuff up here. This is a very sensitive mic. Sorry about all the and pff. Okay, now let's really get started. You need to know that I didn't invent this talk. This talk was put together by my dad, Chase Putnam, who worked at the Warren County Historical Society as its executive director for many, many years. Amazing mind for local history, grew up in a family that loved local history, and he presented this talk and versions of it over many years to schools and community groups and to leadership Warren County. And a few years ago, I took on that responsibility, and it's been so much fun because I grew up fascinated by local history. My mom as well has an amazing mind for local history, especially North Warren, which was her stomping grounds. And I guess I didn't imagine that you couldn't be interested in the stories of where you came from. But I have found out that not everyone is. But I hope if you aren't that much, you will be on fire by the time I'm done tonight. And this is Dad's slide from how he started this talk. That's his self-portrait. He's right up here in the front if you want to compare. But if you know him, you recognize him. Okay, let's get started. This is actually an artist's rendering of the covered bridge that crossed the Allegheny River. It was the first bridge over the Allegheny in Warren. It was built in 1839, connected Hazel Street and Main Street. And because there's a massive change in elevation there was probably a large earthen ramp that would have brought it down to the Main Street level. But this bridge, in this view, we're looking east, so you're really looking towards the area of about where the Hickory Street Bridge is now. This poor bridge weathered very badly, started to fall apart early on, and it finally collapsed in 1855. It was less than 20 years old. And what's interesting is it's still there. Parts of it are still there. So that's a wonderful place to kayak on a summer evening when the air is still and the light's low. You can see the remnants of the original central pier, massive cut stone, and huge long timbers. So they probably salvaged some of what the bridge was made out of, probably beautiful big old growth timber, but a lot of it is still there. And in 2020, one of those timbers popped right up out of the river, and you could go over and kayak right up next to it. Someone finally put a milk jug on it because it was kind of a boating hazard, but it settled back down. But you can touch these with a paddle in low water. So this beautiful bridge, no photographs of it because it fell into the river before the heyday of photography. Now this is hard to see, but I'm going to tell you right now, you can see this. It's right next door in the basement of the Conowongo Club, this beautiful, beautiful mural of the waterfront in Warren in 1852. And it depicts a special day 100 years before. Sorry, it was painted in 1952, celebrating a special day in April 1852 when 2 steam packet boats right here arrived on the same day at the Warren Eddy, which was an unusual circumstance. There's all kind of boat traffic, and you're going to learn more about these different types of boats soon. This was a busy, busy spot. This mural is in beautiful condition in spite of the fire that occurred at the club. It was restored, and I'm sure if you want to see it and nothing's happening down there, you could go in and ask to see it. It's just an extraordinary piece of history on that wall, and I don't even know how, it's huge. I should get the dimensions of it. But this was actually commissioned by my grandfather, Harold Putnam, who was not a professional historian, but an avid amateur historian and knew so much about river history. He was the grandson of 2 rivermen who worked the river. So he loved Warren's history, and especially as it related to the river. So he and Elton Davis, who painted this mural, worked very hard to kind of compile history in images and anecdotes to get as accurate a representation of this waterfront at that time as they could. And you'll see here's that ill-fated covered bridge. It only had 3 more years before it fell into the river. This central pier is what you can still see rocks from. Okay. Let's take a look at some early photographic views of downtown Warren. This is taken from Tanner Hill in 1863. It's hard for me. I like to move around when I do some modern dance while I give a presentation. Stay right next to this mic. 1863. So Tanner Hill is the hill that Liberty Street runs up and over. It's probably named for Archibald Tanner, who was an early merchant in Warren. And you can see here's the Conowongo Creek. The land east of it is still farmland. There's the Allegheny, a little bit of the Allegheny, and nothing that's here remains. Everything there is, and there may be some domestic structures that parts of still remain, but generally everything here has moved on. Here's the original courthouse, right, I believe, right here. Okay, this is a view down Market Street. So looking down towards the Allegheny, which is right in here, from about the vantage of 6th Avenue, up on Tanner Hill again. A wide earthen street. There's the original courthouse. 1863. Another view up on, hey, I touched nothing. I think it's my energy. I get so excited about local history. I probably could fuel light bulbs just by holding them right now. Okay, where are we? Okay, we're looking southeast above 5th Avenue, about 1871. So this house actually is still there on 5th. This is Liberty Street. There's the beautiful Citro home, which is one building that we know is still here, fortunately, thanks to the Citros. These churches are long gone. There's the Conowongo, again, farmland. Look at those beautiful fences, picket fences. Oh, this big church is the Presbyterian. Oh, this is the previous Presbyterian church right on Market Street. Okay, moving on. This is what in 1859, early 1860s was called Water Street and 2nd Avenue. This is the point. However, there's no fountain yet. This building was replaced by the first Flatiron building. If you didn't know, the Flatiron building we have now is the second Flatiron in that place. The first one burned in 1889. So this was a hardware store. Later on, it was a Scott Hotel. But look at these wooden sidewalks. It has a real kind of Wild West feel to it. I love it. And this church tower, again, is the original Presbyterian church. Wow, that arrow just got huge. I'm sorry, I don't know how that happened, but that's handy. Okay, and I didn't warn you that I'm going to be mentioning some ancestors. You heard Susan say I'm a 7th generation Warren County on both sides. So the first ancestor I want to mention here on my mom's side is Nathan Delaney, who was a carpenter, and he worked on this church, the building of this church. Okay. Moving on. This is just to the left of what, dang it. I need one of those Garth Brooks face mics. Or that's an old reference, Taylor Swift, I don't know. Okay, so that's Bunker Hill up there in the back. It's partially deforested, which was typical at this time. And this beautiful Greek Revival string of buildings, of course, is long gone. But again, those wooden sidewalks, and that is, sorry if my mouse is making you motion sick. It keeps drifting here on this angled podium. This is 1864. So there's a Methodist church has popped into the scene. Now, this is the island. And Warren had, for many, many decades, an industrial island. This wasn't a natural island. It was created by the digging of a mill race from the Conemongo Creek, just in the area of the Lowhead Dam that is now gone. And the race came all the way through to about Hickory Street. And this was dug so that water could power mills. So there's this island was full of water-powered mills of all kinds. It was Warren's first industrial park. It included businesses such as the Phoenix Furniture Company, the Piso Company of Piso's Cure for Consumption, Fame, and the Kerberger Paint Shop. And this little bridge was how you got there, unless you had a boat. That's Liberty Street right there. Then you have to somehow go up here. I don't know what's going on here. They're hoisting that wagon up for a paint job, I guess. Again. Okay. Whew. Sorry about that. Now, I want to tell you a little about Piso's Cure for Consumption. If you've lived here a while, you generally have heard of it. It became a very big homegrown industry, and Piso's Cure contained at various times opium, morphine, hashish, marijuana, chloroform, and alcohol. Now, don't ask me why, but the medical profession considered its claim as a cure to be fraudulent. But not surprisingly, it became one of America's best-selling patent drugs until it got shut down and had to stop claiming to be a cure for anything. But little Piso glass bottles are a collector's item. Okay, here we are with another view of the island, but I'm sorry you can't see it because it's flooded. But this is the island. This wonderful little grocery bakery was right about where Hickory Street Bridge is now. And flooding was not uncommon. So this is 1865, and we're looking upstream. And it's fairly thinly populated at that point. Eventually that island just completely filled up with buildings. Here we are at the foot of the island, 1887. This beautiful little sailboat marks kind of the western terminus of the island, and much of this row of commercial buildings is gone now. This is, let's see. Oh, there's the Carver House Hotel, which I'll talk about later. And then this whole block here is gone. And there's a beautiful suspension bridge, which I will talk about more. Here we are at the island again. This island had quite a big, steep vertical bank here, but again, it's flooded. This is in 1947. So at this point in the 40s, some buildings were still there, but not very active. The mill race, which runs back in here, but of course is flooded, was not in use at this point. And after 1964, the race was filled in, and the last of the old mill and factory buildings on the island were razed. And of course, now the old island property is occupied by condos and the parking garage, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, let's go down to the river. This is the state marker that is at the headwaters of the Allegheny River, which is in a field in Potter County near Coudersport. The Allegheny starts just as a little ditch rivulet and then picks up steam, curves up into New York State, and then returns to Pennsylvania within, at this point, the Allegheny Reservoir, the Kinsey Reservoir. Now, I put in this map because I want you to take a look at the length of this waterway. Here's the start of the Allegheny up into New York. Of course, the reservoir is right here, coming down to meet the Monongahela in Pittsburgh to form the Ohio, winding its way further south to meet the Mississippi, and our Allegheny River waters end up in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, I want you to remember, as I start talking about lumber rafting, that timbers from our county worked their way in the form of rafts all the way down to New Orleans. Not all of them did, but a significant amount did. There are homes and buildings, businesses built all up and down here from Warren County timber. And I also want you to think about what it would be like to maybe walk all the way upstream, back home to your farm in Warren County. More on that later. Okay. Now, I want to start with a quote as we get into lumber rafting from Arch Bristow, who wrote a wonderful book called Old Time Tales of Warren County in 1932, and it's just a collection of local lore. It's about this thick. I didn't bring my copy, but it's available in reprint. It's here at the library. I believe the Historical Society may have reprints for sale. It's a little bit not politically correct in its terminology because it's very much of its time, so beware. But some great, I don't know what else to say, old-time tales. It's truly what they are. Some of them kind of mythic and folkloric, and others are true accounts of historical events. And it's very entertaining. But he said in this book, Old Time Tales of Warren County, the river was the great central artery of life, the highway out into the world, and he was so right. So here we're going to start with a square timber raft in Grunderville, which is east of Warren. These guys are heading downriver, very hardy. Notice the bike. This is about 1903, which is actually getting to the end of the active lumber rafting period. But this to me looks like a 1970s 10-speed, and I always think, evidence for time travel, right here. So this is square cut timber raft. I'm going to talk about two kinds of rafts. Note their cook shack. There's a little boat to jump on and off of. And as I mentioned, this wilderness of dense hardwoods and pine and hemlock led to timber harvesting being the first major industry here. In fact, Pine Grove Township was named for those huge stands of white pine. And rafting timber out of Warren County began in about 1797 and ending, as I said, just around 1900. And that's when the last stand of virgin pine was cut, not too far from where this photo was taken in Grunderville. Now, this cut timber was skidded to mills, which were on all the different little streams in the region. And in the spring, they could move timber down these little streams because of the high water. So the timber and the rafts made from them, those all made their journey in spring in high water. And if you canoe and kayak, you would be crazy to go out on the water here in the spring if you didn't have to. It's very dangerous. So once that timber was sold downstream, in the early days, these lumbermen walked home. If they were lucky at some point, especially further south, they could catch a stagecoach or a wagon. But until steamships coming further north and railroads were available, they would walk, and they had their earnings in their pockets. So yes, there were bandits, and they were a threat. You had to be a brave soul to do that. This is this is Grunderville area, a barge works in Grunderville, which was known for its barge building. Barges moved all kinds of commodities, and they did not move of their own accord upstream. They were eventually pushed by steamboats. This is one of my favorite, I think this is my favorite rafting picture. This is right downtown in the Warren Eddy, right by the Hickory Street Bridge. We're looking, there's still a railroad bridge at this point. There's Island Park, or Point Park, what is it called? Sorry. Just beyond it is the pool, swimming pool. The Conewango's coming in right here. And coming in, and this is high water in the spring. And this raft is coming into the eddy at the foot of Hickory Street to actually be joined together with more rafts to make a bigger raft to head south. This raft, so I'm going to tell you about, there were standards about how rafts were constructed and in what proportions and dimensions. So the size of that raft was dictated by the waterway where it was built and that it needed to get down. So these are 2 Conewango rafts. They were individually 17 feet wide by 170 feet long with 1 oar on each end. So 6 of these would be joined together, 3 and 3, to make an Allegheny, which would be 51 feet wide and 340 feet long. So right here, right downtown is where they would add 4 more to this to make an Allegheny. And I don't know how they got around those islands going further downstream, but they did it. So it's amazing how these were constructed. They were made of up to 30 alternating courses, these sawn board, not like the square timber raft I showed you earlier. This is sawn boards, alternating courses of 16-foot boards, which are held together by grubs, which were oak saplings. No metal, no nails, no spikes. It was all kind of woven together in this wooden framework. Drew about 2.5 feet of water and rose above the water line about 2 feet at the most. The pilot. Yes, I like to think that's Grandpa Chase. I know it's not, but more about him later. So some key things here to notice are this little boat. Here's the pilot. This little boat, and then this is the cook shack, which would have had a fire in it for cooking and for sleeping for warmth. And they've got a couple guys on this oar, and eventually an Allegheny would have had 3 oars at each end, and that's how you steered on high, fast water. Now, an Allegheny raft, which would be 4 more of these, typically had 12 hands, a cook, and a pilot. And this was just incredibly dangerous, so maimings and injuries were frequent, and pilots had to know the river like the back of their hand. There was actually a book called The Allegheny Pilot that mapped the river and all of the unseen threats like sandbars and such, low areas, so that they knew what was coming. And when you were going down the river, you never boated the river. You never ran the river. You run it in all tenses. You run the river. And the pilots would use words like crack to give instructions to the men at the oars. That's how they communicated, by shouting specific words. Cracker left, cracker right. It's probably about 0 degrees there too, I'm thinking, that time of year. No leaves on the trees yet. This is another great picture because we're in the Warren Eddy and we can see the beautiful suspension bridge that I'll talk about later, which is just about at the site of the Hickory Street Bridge. And we have 2 Conewangos here. There's a part of a Conewango. Here's some Conewangos. So again, they're gathering here in this still water, and they're going to tie these things together and head down. So when you were floating rafts, you weren't just moving the timber that they were made up of. They were these ready-made surfaces to pile a lot of stuff on. So they'd pile nice hardwood finish lumber, shingles, barrels of commodities, people, and later, once the oil business started up, barrels of oil. Now, I did mention that I had I had 2 great-great-grandfathers who worked the river. And one of them, his whole career pretty much, he started out as a teenager working on rafts and ended up becoming a respected pilot. That was Charles Chase. And he worked the river for over 40 years. And fortunately left some wonderful autobiographical accounts with great details about the specifics of what this was actually like, the logistics especially. So who are these men that ran these rafts? There were professional lumberjacks who did this, but a lot of the men on the extra hands on the rafts were young men who were farmers and townsmen who wanted to earn some extra money and see some new country and risk their life at the same time. But a lot of them couldn't swim because we didn't all, back then it wasn't a kid thing that you did, automatically having swimming lessons. So, there were unfortunate drownings because people would fall into this icy river and not be able to swim to shore. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about amenities on these rafts because it looks pretty rough. Well, the food isn't much better. Salt pork, potatoes, large biscuits, coffee, tea, brown sugar, beans, eggs, and whiskey. Eventually, whiskey was eliminated from rations kind of across the board. And I wonder why. They slept on bunks and benches in the cooking shanty where there was a fire for warmth, and you were really lucky if you get a spot right next to that fire. Now, some men won't be parted from their whiskey, so there became this kind of secondary market of emergency whiskey suppliers, and they were river pirates. And they were pioneer bootleggers who'd row out to rafts, they'd spot a raft, row out there, tie on, and sell their liquor to the raftsmen. And the closer you got to Pittsburgh, the more you encountered pirates. Speaking of Pittsburgh, Warren to Pittsburgh in high water was a 3-day trip by raft. That's about 192 miles, and it's moving pretty fast. Okay, this is raft west of the Suspension Bridge, or Hickory Street Bridge. You might recognize this. A lot of these buildings remain. The 400 block of Pennsylvania Avenue. And what I love about this is there's some ladies out here. So this is the last square timber raft from logging operations on the Conowongo Creek in the Warren Eddy. So I think they were maybe having a party. And there were sometimes impromptu dances on rafts. So a good fiddler could usually get a job on a raft really easily because they used music and work songs to keep the rhythm on the boats when they were having to coordinate their oars. Now, there's a great story from June 1881 when a square dance on a raft gave Warren a good show. This crowd boarded a raft in Onaville with a band of 2 fiddles and a dulcimer. They had a picnic dinner on the raft, and then by the time they swung around into the Warren Eddy, the dance was in full swing, and people were gathered had heard about it was coming, and they were gathered on the bank to watch. A great question I got in a Leadership Warren class when I was giving this talk was, how much were these worth? It sounds dangerous, it's cold, is this how much money could you actually make with one of these rafts? So I did some number crunching, and the best I could figure was an Allegheny raft was made up of at least 400,000 board feet of lumber. And the approximate value of this would be just over $340,000 in 2021 dollars. And this would be pine. The white pine was very desirable. Hemlock was also wanted downstream, but it had a lesser value. Pine was sometimes twice the value. Now, one more raft photo for now. This I found because I wanted to tell you that it doesn't stop at the Allegheny. They get bigger. The Ohio, which is slamming together some Alleghenies and then getting out on the wider Ohio, was 18 Conowongos or 3 Alleghenies. This one is a little bit bigger as far as I can tell. An Ohio raft held up to 1.2 to 1.3 million board feet of lumber. Imagine, and this has got a boat helping steer it here. This picture is from St. Louis, 1869. But imagine, I don't know how you negotiate something that big, that heavy on fast-moving water. This is how you steer, right here. So someone's yelling cracker left, cracker right. Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about dangers on the river. Fog, high winds, collisions, water could be too high or too low. My great-great-grandpa Charles Chase, the pilot, said he considered fog the most dangerous and trying situation ever, and that was a huge issue on the upper Allegheny up here. And now in these big wide rivers, rafting at night wasn't uncommon, but up here they rarely did it because it was considered so dangerous. Islands, rocks, twists, narrows, mill dams, which you could get over if the water was high enough, but you could also get hung up. Rafts broke up all the time. And there was this whole finders keepers situation where it breaks up, everybody go for it, take what you want. So there were lots of houses built from salvaged lumber. A disease, south of Pittsburgh, disease was a huge hazard. Dysentery, malaria, yellow fever, cholera on the Mississippi. Also, on top of disease, you had the pirates and robbers. So armed guards were sometimes taken along on these larger rafts, and they guarded men on the long walk home. Now, the most accidents and loss of lumber was on the Allegheny just because it was so technically difficult. The most challenging operation for a raft, for dealing with a raft, was getting it to stop. So again, you've got this massive, unwieldy construction. And stopping a raft was called snubbing. This was the term for it. So what would happen is I showed you there was little boats on these rafts. So 2 men would jump in that boat, row to shore with a long rope. One of them would jump out, run along shore, try and find a really sturdy tree, and wrap that rope around the tree. And that's how you stopped a raft. It doesn't seem like it would be that effective. You just would pray that the tree would hold. So again, highly dangerous with flying rope, coils underwater. Sometimes the tree snapped and pulled out of the bank. And snubbing was so exciting that this was something that people would hang out at the Warren Eddy to watch because rafts were coming in so often to join together. They'd watch. It was a great show. We're going to go back to the Elton Davis mural. And I just wanted to point out some of these boats. Of course, there's the covered bridge. And Hickory Street is right here. This is 3 Conowangos coming in. There's some more rafts here gathering to join up. The 2 steamboats. And then on the right here we have a keelboat, 2 Conowangos. Here's the island. The mill race runs right in here. The island is very thinly populated at this point, 1852. And this is a flatboat, the Yankee Notion. Okay, let's talk about keelboats. This I got online, so the resolution is poor. But this is a keelboat, this is a flatboat. This is actually taken an illustration from the late 1700s on the Ohio. And the keelboat was a really typical boat for hauling people and goods prior to the railroads because it could go upstream. It's shallow drafted and it was actually pulled, and I don't mean P-U-L-L, I mean P-O-L-E, pulled upriver by men with long oars that they would push their shoulder against, and they would just kind of in unison crawl their way upriver. And this was the only boat that could really get upriver in low water. And I actually have a model of a keelboat here, built by John W. Zen. It says it's incomplete, I think, because it doesn't have guys on it. It doesn't have a man sitting on top playing fiddle and someone taking a nap right there, which he probably earned. But you can see it's a very, very shallow drafting boat. So they could fill that up, and they were quite narrow too. I think they're about 12 feet wide, about 30 feet long. One of these boats, eventually by the 1850s, they had tow paths so they could tow them with horses, but it was all manpower early on. Pittsburgh to Warren going upstream took 10 to 12 days. Of course, back down 3 days. Okay. Oh, and Arch Bristow in his book talks about keel boatmen and how rough and tough they were. He said you could see them coming because they had this kind of hunched posture, and they'd wear the calloused shoulders, and they'd wear these big thick coats with extra padding for that shoulder that pushed against the pole. And then he said, nobody ever trifled with a keel boatman unless he was drunk or unacquainted with the country or tired of living. Okay. This is another version of that mural. I actually have it here for you to look at when I'm done talking, if I ever finish talking. This is a condensed version of the waterfront on that day in 1852, and these are the 2 steamboats that were there at the same time. And this was actually something my grandpa had Elton Davis do as for his letterhead. So this is just cut from the middle. But steamboats were a huge improvement on the ability to move people and goods. And they had a 30-year heyday starting in about 1830 when the steamboat Allegheny in this area, built mainly by Archibald Tanner of Tanner Hill and David Dick of Meadville, they opened up steamboat navigation up to Warren, from Pittsburgh up to Warren, with their boat Allegheny. So they took on some of the business of transporting goods and passengers away from rafts. By 1859, when the railroads were coming in, that era was ebbing away. And also passenger trade for boats too was moved on to railroads. The last steamboat to come into Warren was in 1866, and it was named Annie Lavelle, and it came to pick up oil field supplies. I have one more fun boat picture. This is a beautiful little excursion boat in about 1890, built and worn at Clark's Machine Shop in the late 1880s. And there it's about to go under the suspension bridge. Okay, let's talk about crossing the river for a little bit. I took this out of a book, so it's a photo of a picture in a book, so it's got some graininess to it. But this is the Corydon Ferry, which of course is long gone for a variety of reasons. But this was on the Upper Allegheny near the New York state border. Of course, the town was lost with the flooding of the river valley by the Kinsey Reservoir. I'll talk more about that later. These work their way across rivers by being pulled on ropes. And ferries long before bridges were not uncommon as a way to get across the river all up and down. Railroad, I mentioned the railroad. Let's get into the railroad. Okay, there is still a railroad bridge at this point. This is on the west side, right near Struthers Wells. This building, the former Struthers Wells, is still there. This beautiful covered bridge crossed right about the same point on, what is that, Chestnut Street? Chestnut Street, yep. This picture is from about 1870. So we're on the south side looking north. And this was a bridge built by the Philadelphia and Erie Railroad, and it was a vital link in the Pittsburgh to Erie line. Now, same bridge, what's missing? The roof. So this is Pennsylvania Avenue. We're looking east towards downtown Warren, south side. This poor bridge, the roof blew off in 1882. And it's probably still in the bottom of the river. Got to check that out. Go over there in a kayak on a shallow day and see what's down there. They shored up the sides, but they declined to put the roof back on. This was replaced by an iron span in 1896. Current bridge is from 1949. This wonderful pedestrian bridge was at 3rd Avenue. Now, we're looking east. There's the old Jefferson Street School. And this bridge, as you can imagine, was very vulnerable to ice dams and weather and high water. It was built in 1871 specifically for pedestrian traffic and was replaced in 1904 for a steel vehicle bridge. Wouldn't it be fun to have a swinging bridge over the Conewago somewhere? Again. And now I keep mentioning the suspension bridge. Here we are, dedicate a few minutes to our beautiful suspension bridge. 1873, built in 1871 at Hickory Street, a beautiful, unusual, aesthetically pleasing design. It led to the development of the South Side. It was a toll bridge for almost 25 years. So I'm going to give you some examples of tolls in 1894. 25 cents for 4-horse vehicles, 12 cents for 2-horse vehicles, 2 cents for people and their bicycles, half rate for funerals. So you were headed to Oakland Cemetery. Oakland Cemetery actually predated bridges in downtown Warren, so you used to have to go over by boat. Here's the Carver House, which is long gone. You can recognize some of these facades. We're fortunate to still have them. I love this dog here just trotting along its own way. Here's the abutment for the bridge on the north side being constructed. And note all these rafts waiting to head down. I think we're in high flood at this point. This would be a situation where the water was just too high to go down the river. Here we are with the original little toll booth, which was replaced by a brick structure later on. Oh, this is also, oh no, this is the one that's high water. You can see Crescent Park is flooded there. But look how lovely that bridge is. Here we are where it's being dismantled, and its replacement is well underway and actually looks open. This is 1919. Yep, this bridge opened in 1918. Now the abutments for the suspension bridge are still in place. That's where the park is, Music in the Park. Right there, the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. My grandpa Putnam, he actually worked as a timekeeper for construction of this bridge during the summer, during college. This is not the bridge we have now. You probably know we have a replacement, but they did a wonderful job trying to mimic this elegant arching concrete span. More on transportation. Back to the railroad. This is our beautiful Pennsylvania Railroad depot from the east side, Chestnut Street, west side, sorry, in the early 1900s. By 1895, Warren was serviced by 22 passenger trains daily. We were a real hub. And this station opened in 1869. It was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1974, but the last passenger train went through in 1965. Station sat empty for decades. Keep looking at the clock and panicking. It was demolished in 1986. It was the last remnant of the Pennsylvania Railroad, or the Pennsy, in Warren County, other than the Sheffield Depot. There was a lot of local heartbreak that this station couldn't be saved, and citizens spoke up about it and made attempts to secure grant funds to save it, and the city wasn't really interested, and the owners weren't really that motivated to sell, so it came down. There it is in its decrepitude in the 1970s. Just imagine if we still had that. This is one of our wonderful little Dunkirk, Allegheny Valley, and Pittsburgh railroad stations. This is was where about near Laurel Street, where Worley, one of the Worley manufacturing buildings is. We only have a few depots left in the county: Sheffield and in North Warren, the train station restaurant, but we had many at one time. And this is a picture that Dad took on June 7th, 1976, in front of the Historical Society. This is one of the last trains well, this is just an engine at this point, coming through right on 4th Avenue, Erie-Lackawanna 2522 northbound. This was originally a passenger line, but ended up being only freight. But does anyone remember those trains coming right through town? Oh my gosh, wow. Oh, I love this picture. This is the Sugar Grove stage with the mail bag right in front of the post office. So that would have moved mail and passengers. There's so much photographic record of the rest of the county. This is a very Warren-centric talk in general because it talks so much about the river, but oh my gosh, there is a rich photographic record of all of Warren County, of all the other communities. Now, you may not know, but we had a streetcar line in Warren. And it was founded in 1905 by David Siggins and ran until 1928. This is the Sheffield car. So this ran hourly from Warren to Sheffield until 1928. We're on the Glade Bridge, which was 2 levels to accommodate for the streetcar tracks. And it was electrical run, so you can see the power line it's connected to here. And the streetcar line connected people all over the county to major railroad lines, so you really could get around in and out of the county very easily. Here's a wonderful warm weather open air car. It's in front of the Allegheny Hotel, the Glade Run terminus. This was a streetcar spot. This is now the Eagles Club. I just love this interior view. Look how classy that is. Oh. And here's the North Warren car, number 12, up on Conowongo Avenue. Again, the Allegheny Hotel, now the Eagles Club. This is about 1905. You can see people here waiting for the streetcar. And this was built in 1885, was used for rivermen and other travelers. This is not a streetcar. This is a short line steam train, 2 cars and a steam engine. It was called John Day's Dinky. John Day was the owner, and it was called Dinky because it was such a tiny little engine. And this ran from 1903 to about 1920, Youngsville, Sugar Grove, and it's shown in downtown Youngsville here. It was a 10-mile route with 22 stations running up Matthews Run. So it took about 1 hour one way. I mean, wow, you could really get around in public transportation. Okay, we're moving into the 20th century here, but this is the 1920s or early 30s. This is a Green Line bus. This is a family-owned bus company. There's Jerry Park, the driver. And note these 2 towers, because we're going to revisit those towers. He's kind of parked across Lower Market Street here. This is north, looking north. This is the Motor Lighthouse Service Station, which was on the corner of Conowongo and Pennsylvania. There you can see the old First Lutheran Church, or Warren Players. And I found out during giving this talk at the courthouse last year that this lighthouse was removed in 1973. This is where Mangione Distributor is now. But the lighthouse was removed, and it moved, I think, to Endicott, New York. somewhere up in New York State. It lives. And apparently you could walk up in it to the top. And this is another wonderful, look at this, multi-purpose diner, service station, repair. This is on Pennsylvania Avenue in Laurel. I get more excited about lumber than oil, but I can't not talk about oil, so here I'll do it for one slide. So oil was huge. Oil was huge to Warren, and at one time Warren had more millionaires per capita than any other city in the state because of its lumber and oil barons. And here we can see the height of the oil era about in 1885. This is the Glade oil field on the east side, so we're just west of the Glade Bridge location. And this forest of oil derricks. At one time, once the lumber was taken away, we had these forests of oil derricks. And certainly, it's no wonder we have so many abandoned wells, which are still a big problem. And I should mention Colonel Edwin Drake, 1859, thanks to him, he drilled the world's first oil well near Titusville, and then the boom took off, especially the Tidioute area was really the start of it in this county. Oh, I have one more oil picture. Here we go. It's Conowongo Refinery number 1. This is just up outside of, just past 6th Avenue, really, down on the bank, which is, of course, is all wooded now. And by the early 1900s, we had 13 refineries in a 6-mile radius of downtown Warren. And you can still see some remnants. If you're on the bike trail, you can see some structural remnants of some of these refineries on the Conowongo. Okay, time to talk about buildings that are long gone, but I need to hydrate first. This is the lockup. This was Warren's Borough Jail. And yes, people called it the lockup. This picture's after 1871. We can see the suspension bridge in the background. And I don't know, I couldn't find a date of construction or demo of this building, but it was gone by 1918 when the new the new concrete bridge was constructed. But imagine how, I think the chilliness and dampness of being on the riverbank was part of your punishment, being in that stone lockup. And here, I mentioned the point earlier where the fountain is and the Flatiron. This is, again, it showed up as a hardware store earlier. Now it's turned into the Scott House Hotel. This is in 1873. But I just love this picture. And all these men that had time to stand around. And I know when Dad and I were going through this talk and he was giving me some information to add to my notes, I kept saying, God, look at the guys leaning on the building. There's always somebody leaning on a building. And he said, oh, they're always leaners. These men who are leaning, just hanging around town, leaning against buildings. There's one lady. Okay. Now, this is the Union School, the beautiful Union School. And this stood where the municipal building now stands. This opened in 1856, and it was unique because they charged no tuition. And this was a school for upper grade levels. This was not normal. You usually had to pay tuition for an education at past elementary levels. So elementary and high school students attended here together until the new high school was constructed in 1898 on the corner of Market and 2nd. That is the First Methodist Church there on the right, built in 1833, long gone. And of course, that's Tanner Hill that provided us some great views of town. And now we had a little tiny tidbit of the Jefferson School in that 3rd Avenue pedestrian bridge. This is the beautiful Jefferson Street School with its big addition on the side. Built in 1877, used through the 1940s, and the new school, the mid-century school that's still there, not as a school, opened in 1953. So we had some pretty incredible educational edifices that are unfortunately gone, including this one, which is a real heartbreaker. This is the old high school, which was on the corner of Market and 2nd Avenue. And this picture is pre-1915, but it was built in 1898. It was beautiful buff-colored pressed brick with Ohio sandstone trimmings and a slate roof. And by the 1950s, the third floor was not in use, it was condemned. And the last class graduated from this building in 1961. Can I see a show of hands who went to this high school? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 5. Yeah, just this entrance is so dramatic. This stone entrance and these towers. So the alma mater talks about high in air, thy shining spire. Thank you. It's because of this building, yes. God, it's embarrassing, I forgot. Has been 40 years though. Okay, what else about this? Okay, demolished in 1961 when the new high school was built up on East 5th.
Should never have been taken down.
I know, it's heartbreaking. How's this is Dad, this is your favorite building. This is this beautiful and unusual, you can see the towers there in the background. It's right near the high school. So on 2nd Avenue, this Gothic barn. And we don't have much information about what it was used for, but it was really highly ornamented, a great example of that Carpenter Gothic architectural style. And it's actually being flooded right now. This is from a 1913 flood. This is up near Market, so that tells you how high the Conewango got. Yikes. Now, I've added a few buildings that I am fascinated by, and one of them is the Hoffman Block. This is a commercial building constructed in 1882-83 on the corner of Liberty and 2nd, so where the Kresge building, the Liberty Street Marketplace building is. Beautiful big building. It housed a business college, and there in the ground floor, Smith's furniture, stoves, carpets, linoleums. This picture is 1926. It was raised 3 years later. This it just amazes me. This is the First Methodist Church built in 1885, which is a second home. Previously, we saw a wood steeple from First Methodist Church on 3rd, but this is the second one. And it was located in the parking lot, the Blair parking lot between the fire station and Struthers Library Theater, this massive building. So the congregation left this space in 1927 to their new home on Market and 2nd, and this church sold to another congregation, was eventually demolished. Now, we had little fire stations all over town at one point, and this was the Struthers Hose Company in 1885, which was on the west end near Struthers Wells, raised in 1980. It's decorated for the annual Firemen's Parade in this photo. So the only really remaining example we have of a little neighborhood fire station is the one on 3rd Avenue that backs up to the Moose and Legion block. It's kept in pretty good repair too. Thank goodness it's been saved. And this is a steam engine. This is the Rufus P. King. It had a name. The fire engine, horse-drawn steam fire engine. First used in Warren in 1873. It was named after one of the original members of Warren's Vulcan Fire Company, No. 1. And these steam fire engines were the norm until about 1920, and it's actually actively working a fire right here. And I found out, sadly, that this particular fire engine was scrapped for metal in World War II. But it would be an amazing thing to still have to look at. And then the Carver House Hotel, which shows up, it was a building that evolved over time and got taller and bigger. But it shows up in some of those pictures where the river's in the forefront and the north side of the bank is visible, the business district. The Carver House was built in 1849, and this picture's pre-1926. It was destroyed by fire in 1956, which some of you might remember. The buildings here to the left still exist as the Moose Club. This corner lot where this massive hotel stood, and the rest of this business these business buildings are gone. That's quick fill. Now, I can't understand how this building fit on the footprint of quick fill, but somehow it did. This magnificent, wonderful, classy hotel. And now we've got quick fill. Wah, wah. Okay, so other things that have moved on as time has marched forward were ice companies. And this is another family connection, another so many great-great-grandfathers. I've lost so many, I don't know what to do with them all. This was on my mom's side. John Phillips and his son Wendell founded the Phillips Ice Company, which was based on South Street in North Warren in 1900. And there were two spring-fed ice ponds, one near the site of Dairy Queen on Route 62, and the other on South State Street, where there's a one-story building that has a beauty salon in it. And the road wasn't there. There were railroad tracks, but State Street was the north-south route for cars. So ice was harvested out of these ponds, cut by horse-drawn saws and stored in sawdust in large barns on the site. And then they distributed the ice to customers in these wagons. And there is still a horse barn and a wagon barn. The KFC formerly occupied one. It's there. Well, they are connected. They're right there across from Dairy Queen, I guess. So my great-grandfather, Fred Phillips, worked for the company, and he drove the ice wagon, and he told stories of kids running behind the wagon in the summer to get ice chips on a hot summer day. And when those ponds refroze after the ice harvest, locals were invited to skate on them. This business, of course, closed because refrigerators around 1935. Okay, let's talk about valleys and homeland lost. Do you recognize this? Probably not, most of you. This is the Kinzu Valley, and we're looking down the village of Kinzu. This is all underwater now. So this is about 1940, and the construction of the Kinzu Dam for flood control and hydropower began in 1960, and because of that, over 600 families were displaced by that flood zone, including about 550 Senecas. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers secured the land through eminent domain. And I mean, a person could give a whole hour-long talk just on this one topic, but this is again of looking at Kinzu from the outskirts. There's the school. Beautiful, beautiful valley. Kinzu and Corydon were just a couple of those villages lost. I mentioned Corydon earlier, along with the corn planter Grant settlement and many, many farms. Now this is a slide that Dad took in July 1965. He's down in the river valley, and it has been cleared. The trees have been cut down. You can see there's a fire here. They just burnt the trees that they cut. And buildings have been removed. This is taken after the village of Corn Planter Town was demolished, and they're preparing to flood the valley. So note this cut line. This is in anticipation of the new shoreline, this cut line. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about the Corn Planter Grant. And this is a parcel of about 750 acres that was located along the river just north of Roper Hollow in the Camp Olmsted area. It was a long strip along the river. It was land given to Corn Planter, a Seneca chief, by the Commonwealth of PA in 1791 for him, this is important, for him and his heirs forever. I guess I didn't need to do quotes for every syllable. For him and his heirs forever. This was the last remnant of Indian-occupied land in PA, unique in that it was not a reservation, but a tract actually given to Corn Planter and his family. So why was this given to him? Well, it's ironic that land that was the Seneca's land was given to him, but Corn Planter lived from 1740 to 1836, fought on the side of the British during the Revolutionary War, but afterwards he was helpful in bringing the Seneca support to the side of the new government of the United States. He was recognized as a highly effective negotiator between the Seneca and the government, so 1,500 acres in 3 separate parcels were given to him in appreciation, and given again is an odd term because he was already living in what was originally Seneca territory. Now, in addition to the Corn Planter Grant, nearly 1/3 of the territory granted to the Seneca Nation under the Treaty of Canandaigua in 1794. This is 10,000 acres. That Treaty of Canandaigua in 1794 was signed by George Washington. It was condemned by the building of the dam, all gone. And I always like to mention that wonderful Johnny Cash song, which was actually written by Peter Lafarge, As Long as the Grass Shall Grow, that tells this story. And there's an outstanding documentary from 2017 called Lake of Betrayal that tells the whole story of this struggle and the construction of the dam and the fight to suggest a more practical alternative that did exist, the unsuccessful fight from the viewpoint of the Seneca Nation. It used to be available on Amazon Prime. I checked last night, and it isn't currently. I don't know. It might be in the library collection. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. Okay. I bet all the county libraries have it. It's really moving. Okay, just a little bit more on that. Here's the Corn Planter Monument. Now, the Indian Cemetery was, of course, on the grant, and Corn Planter died there in 1836. This monument was erected in 1866 by the Commonwealth over his grave to acknowledge their importance to him. This photo comes from 1964 when they moved the Indian Cemetery out of the floodplain to the new Corydon Riverview Cemetery, which is about 100 yards south of the New York state line and across the river, and that they moved the entire Seneca burial ground. Okay, time to hydrate. Now, we haven't lost everything, so let's talk about historic buildings that remain. Yes?
I just want to add something to the building of the Museum. As a 6-year-old, I remember sitting watching black and white TV, and the Indians would appeal. They were like public service announcements, but
Yeah.
they appealed, not like the Army Corps of Engineers.
Yeah.
And then every Sunday, you could drive up there, and you can see the big
You
wrecking
watch it.
balls that they used to knock down the buildings,
Mm-hmm.
claws and the big heavy equipment to uproot the trees.
Yeah.
It was devastating to watch as a little kid.
Yeah, and it's people are still angry, and rightfully so. Yeah, and Quakers came to protest with the Seneca, and there were local. I know my grandpa was very outspoken about it. There were a lot of local people who fought for an alternative for flood control, and actually you learn a lot about that in Lake of Betrayal. Their alternative plan they proposed. Okay. Let's move on before we all get too angry. Okay, so Cobham Castle. We're now going to talk about positive things. This is what we still have. Okay, it looks a lot better than it does in this picture where it looks completely and utterly haunted. But this picture is probably from the 1870s. Again, there's a leaner. I hadn't noticed that one before. He's leaning. This is located off Cobham Park Road. Unfortunately, now you can't really see it because of the trees. There's a lot, I think, spruces there that have grown very thick. But this was built in 1856, between 1856 and 1863 by George Cobham, who was of English aristocratic descent. He came to Warren in 1835 after fleeing England because of debt and for breaking church law. He had married his brother's widow, which was illegal in England in 1828. Scandalous. So Lord Cobham died in 1870, and unfortunately his assets were not enough to pay his vast debts. So things got a bit messy with heirs, and the house eventually sold out of the family. But the happy part is it was beautifully restored by Robert and Sally Metzger as a private home. And this is the mansion house, just around the corner. And this is an extraordinary house, or building. It's so unusual because it's stone. Its walls are 2 feet thick. And supposedly the stone was quarried up on Tanner Hill, at least some of it. It's on 4th Avenue, just across from the Historical Society. It was built as a tavern and lumberman's bank in 1833, and eventually served as a hotel, among some other things. It's been apartments for many years, and I've always wanted to get in there. Maybe someday I will. But amazing, this 2 foot thick walls, this construction. Speaking of stone, now, this is not a stone building, it's faced in stone. But this is Warren State Hospital, and this view is from 1885, 1890, and as you can see, we're really at just the original construction here, the main building, which is still called the main building. See some enterprising oil derricks there. Ground was broken in 1874 to build a new mental institution. State Hospital for the Insane is what it was called by the Pennsylvania State Legislature. It was intended to house 750 patients from 10 counties, and it opened in 1880. And this building is 1/4 mile long. And they started on the outside, and they worked their way in because they figured they needed the accommodations first, and then the administrative in the center could wait. They worked their way together, and it all met in the middle. So this is a brick building faced in stone. Some of this stone was quarried in the hills on the other side of Market Street Extension, up above the Hillcrest neighborhood. And again, another great-great-grandfather, Nathan Delaney, who worked on that First Presbyterian Church, he was a carpenter, and he worked on framework and interior woodwork here during the construction and stayed on after it was finished to build furniture. Worked there until his death in 1903. Now I've got an aerial view, which really gives you a sense, this 1/4 mile long, there it is. And we have some other additional buildings at this point. Here are railroad tracks. We don't have Route 62 yet because State Street was still the main way through north. Note the farmlands. Part of this philosophy of care for the insane, the mentally unwell, was to give them healthy things to do that involve physical labor and working with the earth. So there was, some of you remember the beautiful barns that were up there until the whole Lowe's and Walmart sweep. That was all State Hospital farmland. Oh, we're here already? Oh, I'm doing great with time. Okay, yeah. It's the fastest I've ever talked. I hope you can understand at least half of it. This is my favorite building in Warren County, and I always like to finish with this because this is my home away from home. This building has a huge space in my heart. And I can, if you're interested, not tonight, but anytime, I could go on about this building for an hour easy. And I also got a tray of slides that I can work into it too, so from Dad's theater talk.
That should be next talk here.
I would love to. We have to digitize the slides first. They're in a carousel, and we don't have a thing that makes them go whoo, projected onto. What are those called? Slide projector? Okay, Struthers Library Theater. This is an extraordinary building, and I hope to, if you don't already feel that, I hope after I go on about it for about 5 minutes max, you'll feel that way too. This is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It's the 18th oldest operating theater in the country, and it's a highly unusual asset in a rural community. Built in 1883 by Thomas Struthers, who was an Ohioan who came to Warren in 1828 as a young lawyer. He got his fingers in everything. He became a highly respected businessman, a landowner, an industrialist, philanthropist, very community-minded gentleman. And he built this as a gift to the community, and most importantly, is the home for its public library, its quickly growing public library. So what he did was he offered to build this facility that would help fund the operations of the library if the community would provide a plot of land. So a group of citizens got together, purchased this lot on the corner of 3rd and Liberty, and construction began, and this building went up quite quickly. So this concept of how the library would be cushioned by the surrounding spaces financially involved the auditorium, the vaudeville house for live performance, and this floor was outfitted as a Masonic hall. This floor is the library. This section was rented to the post office upon opening. This is we don't have the current post office building yet. And eventually they took over the whole front of the building, and the entrance to the performance space had to be moved over here, and this marquee was built to accommodate that side entrance. This building has evolved dramatically over its whole lifespan, always being tweaked to meet the needs of the community. So and there was also a full basement in which was a newspaper, a bicycle shop, various shop spaces down there. So the library remained here on the 2nd floor until this facility was built in 1916. It had a history of outgrowing its homes, which is a good thing. So let's visit the library room. Oh, this postcard, I love this. It's dated January 4th, 1906. The real thing, Nubby. Okay, now, interestingly, this looks haunted as well, perfect for this time of year. This library room space hasn't changed that much, and I hope if you haven't been in there figure out a way to get in there. I mean, our staff, got a wonderful staff over there, and if you come in and say, "May I please have a tour?" they'll arrange to show you around when they can. It's a really gorgeous space. It's currently used for special event rentals. And it originally had just one level of stacks down here. Of course, the collection kept growing, and so this is the original ground floor stack level. They just pushed it up with 2 more floors of stacks. And we still have some of these chairs. This gasolier, the fixtures were originally gas in the building, and this was rewired and is now beautiful. And this one over here too, beautiful, beautiful chandelier, electric powered. Okay, so this is the interior of the original theater. Remember I told you this building has evolved drastically over time? You're on the stage, you're looking out into the house, and it looks nothing like this today. That's because this is entirely gone. This picture was taken about 1900, and we only have a few pictures of the interior. And we know it had this beautiful horseshoe balcony. It had windows that drapes could be closed to keep out the light. And there was a portable floor that could be placed over the orchestra area here. These were folding chairs for a dance floor. And it was a squared off room. If you go in the theater now, we have a balcony that runs side to side, and there's a beautiful curving ceiling going down to the proscenium arch that the opening of the stage. It used to be very squared off. It was a box. And in 1919, a massive renovation occurred where they gutted this entire interior, and they lowered the stage. They poured a sloping concrete floor. They put in a new balcony. They suspended this plaster ceiling from the old ceiling to get this curved shape, and then completely redecorated. And this was to accommodate fire safety, better accommodate cinema. Movies were coming into the scene, but still accommodate live performance. So 1919 was a major turning point, and what you see now in the theater really replicates the 1919 appearance. Oh, these guys, I know who these guys are, but I forgot, and I don't know what they're doing. I think they're a fire department drill troop or something. I've seen the caption somewhere and I lost it, but they look great. But this is a really unusual photo because you can see the original facade before the first marquee was put on the front. These are the original doors. You actually had to step up into the building. Post office, this was a store space. This is still here, Struthers Library building, 1883. And this building wouldn't be here without the massive renovation that occurred in the 1980s for the theater's 100th anniversary, which my parents are really involved in. I got pulled along on that, and that's when I fell in love with the building. It was a volunteer-run effort to take what had been a crumbling movie house and turn it back into a fully functioning performing arts center. And it's still happening. So, yeah, I fell in love with that place when I was in junior high. Okay, this is another wonderful building and especially important to our local history. This is the headquarters of the Warren County Historical Society. This is taken in 1978. It looks about the same. And although they have a new porch, I think this porch had to be replaced. This is also known as the Struthers Wetmore Schimmelfing home, so Thomas Struthers again. And it's a beautiful facade, modern Italian Renaissance style with a mansard roof. The courthouse is also this architectural style. It's very popular in the Victorian era. Construction was started by Thomas Struthers' son when he was in his 20s as his family home, but he died of typhoid fever in his 20s in 1871. So Struthers Sr. took this project on, finished building it, and gave it to his daughter, Anna Struthers Wetmore, as a wedding gift. It was purchased by the county in 1950 to become the courthouse annex, and it became the Historical Society home in the 1960s. Now, we're almost done. I've shown you so many pictures of buildings and water and big piles of lumber that it's time to remember that all that happened because of people. I love this picture. This is just something else. This is crowds gathered on Pennsylvania Avenue to welcome home soldiers from the Spanish-American War in October. Actually, what's today, the 20th? What's today? This was October 19th, 1898. And I'm worried about these ladies on these tin roofs. I hope no one was injured, but I think they would have had a fairly soft landing. There's so many people here. So just as a reminder that because of the people that came and settled here and decided to make it home, and enterprising spirits of all kinds, we have this wonderful community that we can enjoy being part of. And I'm going to give you some of my favorite references for historical photos. I'm going to leave this up so you can take a picture of this with a phone if you want. But these are my favorite books personally for local history images. These Images of America books were done with the Warren County Historical Society in cooperation with Arcadia Publishing. The Way We Were by Charles Traynor. Cavalcade is a Warren County Historical Society book that my dad put together. And then the Historic Buildings in Warren County, volumes 1 through 4, they're paperbacks, but they are just chock full of historic buildings and a monograph on each building. And check with Historical Society, use books in the area, use bookstores, the libraries should have some or all of these. Now for digital image collections, you can go to the Historical Society's webpage, and then it's pretty easy to find your way into various topics there. And for Warren Public Library's webpage, there's the address, and I told you how to get to Allegheny Chronicles, which is a great collection of historic photos of various types of the region. So that's my last slide, and I'll leave that there. I also have, I brought, just so you can see, just as a visual reminder, if you're out looking for them, what these are my favorite local history books right here. And then if you want written material, there's Arch Bristow's Old Time Tales of Warren County. There's Shank's History of Warren County. The Historical Society can guide you, and the reference room in the library too. And then there's also the artwork by, help me, Julie. Thank you, Hilton Davis, that shows the riverfront in 1852. And I thank you for your attention and your patience while I stumbled along because I was talking so fast.